Hey guys, welcome to BP the Bible Perspective. I'm going to talk about the subject of hell. Going to hell. Is it torture or torment? Now before I get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Now, this subject of hell, and I'm going to say it's probably one of the most objectionable points of Christianity. And that is this idea or notion that there is going to be an eternal banishment, punishment in the flames of fire for all eternity, burning and burning and burning. Now, yeah, it is a very kind of horrific thought. But I want to kind of break it down so that we can that's why I asked the question, is it torture or torment? Now, as I said, if you take the element of hell away out of Christianity probably be more accepted with some people. However, the idea of the morality of Christianity is just as annoying. But the idea of hell is frightening, right? Okay, so this idea of when we talk about hell, we first and foremost, remember, let's define the terms. The term H-E-L-L is really a garbage dump. That's right. When Jesus was talking, and let me just say this, Jesus talked more about hell than any other biblical writer. Okay? Fun fact. And why? Because his message, by the way, this is why I'm here, to stop you from going to hell. But the term hell, our English word H-E-L-L, was actually a garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. It was called Gehenna or Hinnon, and actually at one point it was an Old Testament city that fell to ruin, and then later now became a garbage dump where they would have a perpetual fire. They burned the city's refuge, also bodies, sometimes like derelict bodies, whatever. And the picture was you had this fire, then they would throw these bodies in, and sometimes you would see maggots and all that. And Jesus captured that and said, rejecting me is like hell. You're going to be spending in hell, in the agonies or torments of hell. Okay? Jesus even told a story once in Luke chapter 16 about a rich man and a poor man. They start off in life where the rich man living his life, living his best life, okay? And there was the poor man who just wanted the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Well, they both died, and the poor man was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, while the rich man died, and he says, and was in hell, and was buried. And then he says, he lifted his eyes in hell, being in torment in the flame. He looked over and he said, wow, there's Lazarus, whom I used to see begging at my doorstep. And he saw Abraham, and he says, Father Abraham. Now, for those of you that kind of don't know, Father Abraham, remember, not only was the father of the nation of Israel, but more importantly, he is really the forefather of the faith, because it is from that man where the bloodline of Jesus would come. In fact, God's covenant promise was, in you all of the families of the earth would be blessed. And so when Jesus tells the story and he uses the imagery of Abraham in Lazarus being in Abraham's bosom, that is from a faith/righteousness standpoint. It signifies that the man had faith, and the Bible tells us that those who died in faith before Jesus died received their righteousness as a credit. In other words, they were waiting for Jesus to come. Those after Jesus who believe in Jesus are born again, born of the Spirit. And now comes the reason for hell. Why is there hell? You start with the sin nature of man, and you have to understand that the sin nature is not just reduced to just committing bad acts that God doesn't like, but it is this rebellion against God, a rejection against God himself. It is that nature. Think about Adam for a moment. You go back to the book of Genesis, and here we see Adam, the first man. God creates Adam. He gives Adam everything. I mean, literally, he had the world. God says he wasn't, it's not good for man to be alone. So he makes Adam Eve. And Eve was his mate, soulmate, rib, right? She was the most beautiful woman in the world, although the only woman at the time, right? Everything was perfect. Remember, the earth was perfect. They were naked and didn't know it. They didn't fear snake bites, animals, lions attacking them, anything. Everything was perfect. Think about the vacations that Adam and Eve could enjoy, right? God had even created their own little paradise. Literally, it was paradise called Eden. Except one thing, God says you can't eat of the tree in the midst of the garden. Now, some people would say, well, why did God put the tree there in the first place? Because he's God. It's his game. He can do whatever he wants. But that's not the big issue, is it? The issue is going to be, why did Adam eat from the tree that God told him not to eat? And therein is the problem, because there was no pressure, there was no depression, everything was perfect in Adam's life. The fact that he would sin when everything was going good for him, it's baffling in itself. And that sin you see throughout the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. That principle that says, you know what? I'm rebelling against God. And now it comes to the fact that, okay, every person after Adam was born with a sin nature and thus hopelessly lost in their sin. Well, God sent Jesus to remedy that. And thus, the question becomes now, why would you reject that? Because God, in his love, as Jesus said in John 3:16, God loved the world this way. He gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him will not perish but have everlasting life. So the bigger question is, why does man reject God? The answer, his sin nature. Has nothing to do with being confused, not understanding, being mad at God, any of that. The idea is that man is a sinner and he rejects God. And that's why. Now it comes to the fact then that, okay, since you reject God, then what is the consequences of rejecting God? Despite the fact that he provided the salvation for you to not face his wrath. Well, that's where the torment comes in at. Now understand that the stories that we have of when Jesus talks about hell, remember, hell itself is an illustration. It is a garbage dump. Everybody knew about the garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. What it represents is what's called Hades. So you got hell, the garbage dump, and then Hades. That's the place of the departed dead. And Hades was a place where if you reject God, the wicked, the evil, you reject God, you're placed in that place called Hades, waiting for the eternal judgment, called the judgment, great white throne judgment, where then you would then be banished for eternity from the presence of God. Let's go back to hell for a moment, because then we go back to our story that Jesus told about the rich man and the poor man. The rich man woke up, he lifted up his eyes in torment in Hades, okay? Now remember, this is after death. That's not a state of mind, it is a place. And after death, he woke up and he said, hey, I see Lazarus, the guy who used to beg at my doorstep. So he says, hey, send at Lazarus that he may dip his finger in water and cool dip his finger in water to come and cool my tongue. Now, Abraham says, no can do. There's a big chasm before us. Now, this story tells us about a place then that God is going to place people who what? Who rejects him. And that's the interesting thing. That is the point that needs to be stressed. You see, nobody's going to be in hell that frequently don't understand. Nobody's going to be in hell that they don't, they're just confused. It is always going to be a place. And that's the torment that people are going to live with. In other words, see, the fire represents the kind of absence, the pureness of God and the absence of his presence and his love. The agony of never being fulfilled away from God, since God made you to be a part of him. So it is always hard to reckon with the fact that there will be people who have rejected God, and then they will face that eternal consequences for that. Some of them will be relatives, friends, loved ones, but nevertheless, not one single person would ever go to hell because of an unjust reason on God's part. And you won't see that until we see the judgment. But understand that it is always that the torment there is because of their choices of rejecting God. And by the way, let me just say this, that when we know that Jesus is telling, in a sense, a story, giving us a kind of a picture, because remember, fire is a physical properties of elements, not in the spiritual realm. Anyway, much more could be said about this, but that's my perspective. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Till next time, I'll see you then.